So I want to take this opportunity to, I will introduce Zakiyyah Ali, Debbie Blyth, and Maria Thompson. I invite them to the stage. They will share a little bit about the exciting world of cyber from their perspective, some of the amazing accomplishments they've had in their industry and their years of experience. And I've had the distinct pleasure of working with both Maria Thompson and Debbie. They didn't give me the chance to introduce them because I would have talked for like 2 hours. One of the things we have, we have this group chat with all the state CISOs across the country. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, we're like, what are you doing? No, what are you doing? And the same way, it's like, I'm getting hit. How bad? What are you seeing? And then I'm up, like, what am I seeing too, right? So that partnership has enabled me to survive 5 years in this program. And even though they've moved on from the leadership roles that they've had, they're still a resource for me until this moment, and we'll pick up the call anytime I call. So thank you for joining us at Security, doing an amazing job in developing our next generation workforce. Hopefully you get the chance to tell everybody about that, and looking forward to this panel.
Excellent. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Zakiyyah Ali. I am the Executive Director of the Tech Council of Delaware, and very briefly, the Tech Council of Delaware is a workforce intermediary organization here in the state that was formed to build and expand inclusive tech talent pipelines. And so I'm thrilled to be here today, and I will allow my esteemed panel to introduce themselves. We hope you enjoy the conversation.
I am Debbie Blyth. I was the Chief Information Security Officer for the state of Colorado for 7 years, prior to joining CrowdStrike 2 years ago as an executive strategist.
Good afternoon, everyone. Maria Thompson. I'm an executive government advisor with Amazon Web Services. I've been with Amazon Web Services now for a little over 2 years, so you can see there's a trend going on between Debbie and I. And prior to, I was the State Chief Risk and Security Officer for the state of North Carolina for 6.5 years.
Yep. Well, thank you for that. So let's just jump right in. Why don't you tell us all how you got started in technology? How did you begin a career in technology?
Well, for me, my dad actually brought home a computer when I was in about like 8th grade maybe, to give me something to do over the summer, and this was way before the time of when computers in the home were a normal thing. That's how old I am. But he also brought me a basic programming book, and he wanted me to learn to program in BASIC. And so then when he would come home from work, he would help me to debug and troubleshoot. And just sort of, I think he wanted me to go into technology because he was in technology. And so it sort of started me down that career path at that time.
Excellent. And we do know that children will emulate what they see from their parents in terms of career paths. And so regardless of what types of career paths their parents had, we do want them to know that there is great opportunity in the field of technology to launch a career. So kudos to your dad for getting you started on that. Maria, would you like to chime in a little bit there?
Sure. For me, it was a little bit different. I didn't mention this in my intro, but I'm a retired Marine, so my career started in the Marine Corps. And so I started in data communications, which was largely focused around data security, making sure that the messages were secure, and as they, transitioned from leader to leader, so on and so forth. And then, years into the field, they decided to start focusing on cybersecurity. And they said, we want to create, I think the Marine Corps was one of the first services to actually create a cadre of Marines focused on security. They called it information assurance back then. And so they had an outreach. They said we were looking for 30 Marines to lateral move into this MOS to focus on cybersecurity specifically. And I was one of the 30 Marines. I put my hand up in the air, volunteered, and the rest is history. So really, my journey began in the Marine Corps, and that's where I really got my start.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your service, first and foremost. And again, I think what we hear in that particular story is that if there are opportunities, don't be afraid to kind of raise your hand and say, I will try it. And so what's the worst that could happen in some ways is that it shifts your entire trajectory of your career and you get to launch something new. We do know that women in the technology field can face some unique challenges along the way. It's not always easy. Now there are some great things and we're going to talk about those too. But can you enlighten us a little bit maybe about some of the challenges or hurdles you faced in your career and how you work to address or overcome those?
Yeah, I had a boss one time that as I was transferring into that organization, this was several years ago, a lady took me aside and said, "You're not going to like working for this guy. He does not like women at all." And sure enough, that was absolutely the case. He literally got rid of all of his direct reports, all of the women in leadership positions. I was the last one standing. And being in charge of security in that organization, it wasn't like, ignoring me wasn't an option, wasn't going to help me get my job done. And so I'd schedule a meeting with him, he wouldn't show up, I'd go to his office, he wouldn't be there. And I started to realize that he was actually doing a lot of business and getting a lot of work done either in the men's room or out in the smoking section. And these were areas where I just wasn't. And so I started to kind of pay attention to who was in his inner circle. Who were those people who were helping make decisions in the men's room or in the smoking section? And I started to work to develop relationships with those individuals. And so I would do things like a vendor would come in and they would bring a bunch of lunches, and there would be lunches left over, and then I would stop by one of those gentlemen's office and say, "Hey, I noticed you didn't get a lunch. Here's a lunch, and by the way, let's talk about some of the challenges that you're having, and maybe I can help." And then eventually, after we developed that rapport, they were interested in my challenges and how they could help. And so I sort of used those individuals to get the message to the boss and to help get support for the things that I needed to have done. So I think, my lesson from that is that the people who are making the decisions aren't always the people that you think. And so figure out who the stakeholders are and figure out who the key decision makers are and work to create relationships with them and work to get them on board with your strategy. And then if all else fails, they can help deliver that message as well if you're not getting listened to.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that wasn't easy to go through as an experience, but one of the things it can certainly tell us is that, in every challenge, there's also something to learn and something to try, because there is no career that's not without some of those struggles or challenges. And so kudos to you for not letting that stop you and for finding ways to build some resiliency there. So thank you for that. I'm sure you faced some challenges as well, Maria.
Yes, and unfortunately, it's while I was in the military again. So I'll use that as an example. There was a time when, as you heard earlier, that I was in data communications, and I decided to, as part of your career journey, you're expected to do what's called a B-billet or additional duty, and so I decided to go on embassy duty. So if you think about those Marines that guard the embassies 24/7, 365, I was one of those. Did two embassies. I was in Tel Aviv, Israel, and N'Djamena, Chad. If you've never heard of N'Djamena, Chad, you probably don't want to go there. But where my challenge came in was when I came back from that tour. So it was almost 3 years, and I came back into an IT field that didn't exist the way that it was when I left. So the challenge was really around technology and the transformation that was occurring while I was away. So when I left, we had the old green gear, we called it, heavy duty government off-the-shelf equipment. When I came back, we were using commercial off-the-shelf equipment. We had server client network. It was completely different. And so I came back at a senior rank, and I was expected to already know all of this technology because I had to lead Marines in these areas. And so the challenge for me was I had to go back to school, and I had to relearn the new technology, had to learn how to guide and implement these new capabilities broadly across the units and the companies that I was supporting in the military. And I think when you think about that, when you're in IT, it's never a one and done, right? You're always learning, continuous improvement, and that's something that has, carried me forth in my career.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think it's probably important to note that women are not a monolith in IT, and so some of the challenges that women face in technology can be varied. I think I would encourage all of you to, take some time with some of your women colleagues in tech and just hear about their particular career stories. I had the pleasure of doing a similar panel for women in tech last year, and I think it was super impactful in that the folks that attended, both men and women and individuals of all different gender and gender identities, were able to say, we didn't know that that existed before. This is enlightening to hear. And so we combine that, with the opportunity for panelists to also share some of the career accomplishments, because it's not always doom and gloom either. There are some things that you both have accomplished. So maybe we take a little time and just talk about either a significant career accomplishment or a defining moment that you're most proud of.
Yeah, for me, I would describe it more as a defining moment. When I was CISO for State of Colorado, we had a ransomware event that took down the Colorado Department of Transportation for a month while we worked to restore systems. And I would say that was a career-defining moment because, for one thing, you never know when you're in charge of security and an agency goes down if that might actually be the end of your job there. But for me, it wasn't. But what I learned in that moment was that I had phenomenal partnerships across the state that I could rely on. And so we called in the Colorado National Guard, we called in the Office of Emergency Management, we had the FBI on site with us, we had other agencies sending folks to help. Even I called peers in local government around me, and they sent people on site to help. And so for me, just being able to really call on those relationships to assist me was so helpful to me in being able to prop myself up and keep myself going during that time. But afterwards, what it did for me is, looking back, I was able to see so many lessons that I learned. And people around the nation love for me to come and share those stories and talk about those lessons. And so it's given me tons of opportunities to really reflect on that, to think about how positive that turned out to be, how much of a, somebody called it a veiled blessing, how much of a veiled blessing that turned out to be in my career. And I think has given me opportunities that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So it was something defining that turned into a positive thing.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Maria, any sort of career accomplishments or defining moments you'd like to highlight?
So I'm going to piggyback a little bit off of what Debbie just said, because she mentioned what she learned and what defined her in her role. But I'll tell you, as a peer at the time, we all learned a lot from what happened within Colorado. And I think that it helped us to strengthen our security posture and our incident response capabilities broadly. I believe Colorado, during that event, you were the first state to leverage the mutual assistance with emergency management, where you're able to actually have another state entity come in and support you guys.
Yep.
We've never had that before when it came to cyber. We've seen it for natural disasters. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's the
EMAC.
EMAC.
I don't know what that stands for, though.
But it was the first known within the cyber community. So again, we learned that it's possible with these attacks that were happening, and that we could leverage, and we can, again, support each other through mutual aid. Now, for me, from a defining moment perspective, I would have to say that, now you've heard my earlier career and what I did, and as I came up the ranks and so on and so forth. When I retired from the Marine Corps, I retired as the cybersecurity chief for the Marine Corps. And the reason why that's defining for me and as an achievement is we typically don't celebrate our firsts. I was the first female to have that role. And I was also the first E9 Master Gunnery Sergeant in the Marine Corps to have that role. So for me, that was a huge achievement from my career, and it's something that I look back on with great pride, and I hope that we all have defining moments and that we all celebrate our firsts and tap into our superpowers, because we all have that.
Excellent. Thank you. Agreed wholeheartedly. I am the first executive director of a tech council here in the state of Delaware, which was not easy walking into either. I'm not a native Delawarean, so that was already one strike against me for some folks. I am a Delawarean now, But you know, I'll venture to say that it isn't easy being a first, but sometimes it gives you a great opportunity to set a standard, to create your own platform. You don't have to fill someone else's shoes. You can really start it from scratch. So I super enjoyed, in terms of my career accomplishment defining moment, of building the Tech Council of Delaware kind of from scratch, if you will. The organization did rebrand in March 2023, but that's one of my most proud accomplishments recently. I'll segue a bit, since you both spoke about building relationships and the power of that network, and ask you a question that maybe we didn't quite talk about yet, but have you had any mentors or advisors or folks that were really in your corner supporting you as you developed your career, that you could lean on for advice and encouragement, both during the high times of your careers and maybe the low times?
Yeah, I would say I had some tremendous mentors who, they didn't always know that they were my mentor, but just watching individuals and the way that they would lead people and the way that they would deal with situations, and even, you know, early in my career when I was first promoted to manager, and a boss who said to me, you know, look, I'm asking you to make a hard decision, and either you're going to step up and you're going to make this decision, or I'm going to make it for you and you may not like what I choose. And so it was a little bit of tough love, and I appreciated that. It helped me grow. So I would say, in addition to, you know, sort of watching and observing, having people sort of encourage me and push me was extremely helpful for me.
Yeah, you know, I'm sure I've had, there's no one particular person that really stands out above all else. Similar to you, Debbie, I think I've had mentors, not I think, I know I've had mentors, and I've learned what not to do from a leadership perspective. So I guess those are anti-mentors? I don't know, what would you call those? But you can definitely learn from watching folks, from seeing how they engage from a leadership perspective, how do they treat their teams. That's going to be important as you grow and get up in rank and position, because that will define how people, do they want to stay with you? We're struggling right now with this deficit in cyber workforce, right? And if folks are leaving, you know, as in droves because your leadership skills are lacking, then that's something that you really need to address. And you know, as you go in, climb the ranks, and as you learn what not to do and what to do, I think that you'll find those folks within your area, you know, whether they're in leadership positions or they could be a peer that you've learned from along the way. So I think that you should not just necessarily look for one particular person to be your mentor. There's mentors in everyone, and I think everyone in here can be a mentor to somebody else. And I think that's really it. Yeah, just open your eyes and look for those folks that have positive and then sometimes negative things that you know not to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. And constructive criticism can also be helpful as well, you know, provided it's delivered with compassion and care as well. That feedback helps you to become better as a professional. You mentioned a little bit about the cyber workforce. Here in Delaware, it's projected to grow just over 12%. In the next 4 years or so. And so we're grappling with that right now as well. The Tech Council of Delaware led a project team in designing an entry-level cybersecurity workforce program, because we know that entry-level talent amongst mid-level and senior-level talent is going to be needed for us to remain competitive. So when we're thinking about the workforce and hiring, if you put your sort of management and leadership cap on for a moment, what do you look for in a potential candidate? What sort of skills and competencies really stand out to you?
So I'll say this. When I was in North Carolina, when I was in the CISO role in North Carolina, we created a cyber veterans apprenticeship program. And so we interviewed these veterans who were transitioning into the IT field. Some of them were truck drivers, supply chiefs, you know, those types of roles, not really focused on IT. And so the questions that we asked through the interview process was more along behavioral. How do they think? Or, you know, what did they do when they went home? Were they that hungry where they were spinning up a lab and they were, you know, doing some after-hour curriculum activities to kind of enhance their capabilities? So those are the types of things that I would look for. The need, the drive. You're looking for someone that appears motivated, that's willing to put in that extra effort, not necessarily thinking that if I'm going to teach you everything, you have to bring something to the table as well. So some of the questions that I asked and I would try to pull out from those candidates were, how do you think about different scenarios. So that, are you analytical thinker, or are you just basically, if the book tells me, 1 + 1 is 2, I'm going to take that as word, versus question it, because when you're talking about cybersecurity, not everything is black or white.
Excellent.
Yeah, and something I would add to that is I'm looking for people with communication skills and interpersonal skills and good ability to communicate topics, whether it's written or verbal or all of that, because that's critical in cybersecurity. The minute you say cybersecurity, people look a little nervous. And so you have to sort of boil it down into language and things that they care about. And you really have to create those relationships to get anything done. Because when I was CISO, in all of the places where I was CISO, my authority alone would not allow me to get security projects implemented. It really was about creating relationships, getting the infrastructure team on board, getting the director of infrastructure to agree, getting it in his list of priorities in order to make traction on that. So it really, for me, it was about relationships and communication, and those are some of the things that I'm looking for as I'm looking to hire folks.
And that's not uncommon from what we actually hear now from employers in Delaware in terms of what they're looking for in entry-level tech talent. It has been a lot of those, what people call either soft skills, power skills, durable skills to complement the technical side, but certainly that willingness to learn, the persistence in the face of adversity, building those relationships and networks certainly set folks apart from the competition when they're going after technology jobs. So thank you for sharing that. As you think, of all of the things you've accomplished in your career, all that you've learned, if you could kind of go back and give your younger self some advice, what would that be?
You can do it, and you did it. Just cut and dry like that, because there are so many times that we second guess ourselves. We think that we're not able to do this, we can't do this, no one looks like me that's doing it, and we let these opportunities pass us by. And then years later, we look back and with regret. I would say take that jump, that first leap. And if you fail fast. But make sure that you're able to recover. But don't necessarily let that bring you down. Let that hold you back. Always make yourself uncomfortable with what you're doing, because if you get too comfortable, and this is how I've always felt, every job that I've had, every role that I've had, if I felt where I was getting to that, I'm not challenged anymore. It's getting too easy. I'm feeling this complacency. Then I know it's time to move on. So always put yourself in a situation where you're learning, where you're striving, where you're challenging yourself, and that also, ensures that you're getting growth along the way.
Yeah, and I'll say that same bad boss who didn't like women, he also did not think that security was a full-time job. And so he put me in charge of all kinds of projects. So I was in charge of employee engagement. I was the lead project owner for implementing various marketing projects. And at first I would sort of shy away from that, and I would think, I don't know anything about marketing, and I have a full-time job. But as I look back, I realized that those opportunities actually sort of broadened my knowledge of the organization and prepared me for my next role, in which I was having to make broad strategic decisions about an organization that was way outside of my traditional security role. So what I would tell my younger self is I wish I would have been paying attention to those opportunities to think broader, to see bigger, to be involved in other things in the organization, to really learn about the organization, because that might be what's preparing me for my next role.
Absolutely, and I think we kind of want to know what happened to this bad boss. What happened to this person?
Oh, this is the juicy part.
Yeah, so he, I was working in this company where it was well known there was a lot of turnover in this organization, and I worked there 5 years. I was in charge of security for 5 years. We had a problem where a CIO was being replaced every year. And so I kind of looked at him and thought, he's terrible and I don't like working for him, but I can outlast him. Because he's got 11 months now. And actually, I ended up going to work for the state of Colorado before, and I left before he did, but about a month after I left, he was gone as well.
Yeah.
By gone, she means fired.
Gone. I think sometimes both good and bad leadership, gives us opportunities to learn what to do and what not to do as well. Some of the advice I would have for my younger self is kind of similar to what Maria said. You can do it. Go ahead and do it. Try. Don't let fear stop you. I think sometimes in some of this work, even though I've not necessarily been in the tech industry my entire career, I've trained hundreds of individuals, both corporate workers, residents that have worked in low-wage occupations looking for something else. I've utilized technology all of my career, and I've found that, sometimes women will second-guess themselves or will let fear stop them. We have statistics on young ladies that leave the engineering field because they're not respected. Their teachers don't validate them or support them. And so I would say don't let fear stop you. You might be redirected, but keep going. And so I think that's great advice for anyone. Thank you for sharing that. I know that we're kind of coming to a close. I'm not sure if, Solomon, you want to take any questions from the audience or not before we wrap up?
I would love to take questions.
Absolutely. So if there are any questions for our panel, please let us know if you have a few of those, and speak loudly so everyone can hear you, and then we'll wrap up shortly.
So I am a recent graduate from Capital Technology University, and I have the pleasure of being here with Bay Health Medical Group. I am one of their newer cybersecurity analysts that they've added to the team. But just going through university and talking about that need of cybersecurity professionals, especially at the entry level. In my entire class, there were about 250 students, and I think about 3 of them were girls. So first off, why do you think there's a disparity in such a problem with getting people into the IT space, especially cybersecurity? I think a lot of people are intimidated by it personally. But on top of that, why women or maybe certain groups are not pursuing it with in the swaths that we're seeing? Just why do you think demographics are currently the way that they are?
Yeah, I think that's a great observation, and you're absolutely right. And I notice that a lot of times when I go to technology conferences, where I look around the room and there's 100 men and only maybe 20 women. So I think there's a couple of things. I think there's a little bit of a stigma where people think cybersecurity is very technical. You've got to be the hoodie, the heads down, the basement, the mad keyboard skills. And so I think part of it is just making people aware that it's women like us. It's people like us that are doing this. It's not, it's not necessarily the hoodie person only. Although there's a role for that person too. So I think that's really part of it. And I think getting to them at a younger age and kind of reinforcing that message. And I was talking with a coach at one of the schools local to me in Colorado. He has a Cyber Patriots club at his school, and he's a well-respected coach who they go to state every year, and he has a lot of women on his team. And I said, how did you get women on your team? And he said, well, I will ask a student to come and bring a friend. Because he said if that student will come in and look in the room and see only boys, she'll turn around and walk back out. But if she comes in with a friend, she'll stay. Or if another female student then comes in and sees a couple of female students in there, they'll stay. So it was like, come and bring a friend and do this. And so it was a little bit of reinforcement, I think.
Yeah, there's so many thoughts that come to mind when that question comes up. And, I have a 13-year-old and a little girl, and I am sad to say that she is not at all interested in the IT field. I've given her a laptop from day one. She's got every technology, Oculus, you name it, everything that could be STEM related. Robotics, I try to get her into robotics, and she's not currently in that, aligned to that thought. I'm still pushing though. I would say, just to Debbie's point, is it's really to introduce them at an early age, make sure that they see more of themselves in those rooms, in the STEM curriculum. And I think that focusing on the positive side, the numbers are changing. And they are getting better. And just like anything else, it takes time. But I think that the more that companies and organizations such as yourselves are focused on making sure that we have that diversity and make those opportunities available to those to females and any ethnicity or whatever, to make sure that your team is as diverse as possible, then that's the way that we need to go. And it's changing. It's just not as fast as we'd like to, but it's getting better.
Absolutely.
Follow up, sorry. I just wanted to touch on that and say thanks for the response. And I agree there's a lot of work being done currently to change demographics in IT. But in all industries, it's a problem, especially in women-ruled industries like nursing and other positions that are typically by women. We need to do more work, not just as a society, but as a world, to kind of destigmatize certain positions and think that they're only for one sex.
Absolutely, and thank you for that question and statement. You're absolutely correct. So appreciate that. In our closing, we'll have maybe one last sort of parting thought or takeaway you'd like the audience to have today.
Sure, I'll go first. You know your superpower. Find your superpower. In AWS, we talk about our superpowers all the time, and that's one of the things that I always say, that you need to take that time, get that quiet moment, and think about what is that thing that you bring, that only you can bring to a conversation, to a meeting, to a project, and focus on that, because you'll be surprised how that will help you in your career. So we all have a superpower. Find your superpower and use it.
Awesome. And for me, I would say be a lifelong learner. Look for opportunities to learn new things, and don't criticize yourself if you fail or you make a mistake. Look at what you learned and move forward with that new knowledge.
Yep, and I think I would say, just to chime in, I would say just develop a track record of success. So in some ways, knowledge and learning can't be taken from you, neither can what you've accomplished. So continue to stack that up and let that profile carry you forward in your career. So I'd like to thank both Maria and Debbie for their time today. Both traveled far and wide to be here with us. So thank you for sharing your stories and your insights. And thank you, Solomon, for allowing this panel, much needed panel about women in tech, to take place at the conference. Thank you so much.